So, Monster Hunter Wilds has been out for 2 weeks now, and I think it's time we had a talk about the problems in the game. And no, I'm not talking about performance, that's its whole other thing. Please feel free to yell at me in the comments if I'm all wrong or way off base. All right, content. Yes, I have no life the game with over 100 hours and HR, I don't know, over 120. And yes, more content is coming out in April. And I understand, of course, there's no content for me left, right? Because I've played too much. I've played World and Rise, so I know how the cycle goes. We're going to get monthly content, new monsters, new events up until the next paid DLC comes out, which will be Master Rank. Probably the best version of Monster Hunter comes out with the DLC. So, Sunbreak was better than Rise, Iceborne was better than World. Whatever we get is going to be better than Wilds. But my problem here is this first game, this initial release for Wilds, feels incomplete. Not only are we missing things like the canteen or the gathering hub, but we're missing a lot of content that normally would be expected in a Monster Hunter game. So let's just compare to World because it's the most direct comparison, as Rise was more of a mobile game. There's less story focus, and Rise was more focused on a mobile pick up and play experience. From a straight numbers perspective, World had more monsters and more quests just from the launch. World had 37 monsters, while Wilds only has 29. And one of those, the final boss, can't even be hunted in high rank. So I would really count it as 28 monsters for now. Now, World did pad those numbers considerably with a lot of reused variants like Laviosloth and who knows how many Rathian and Rathalos colors that they added. But content is content, and even a palette swap monster helps with the playtime when we're waiting for DLCs and new monsters to come out. Now, to Wild's credit, the monster design and originality are top tier. So I'm not sure if I'm going to give the point to Worlds on this just because it has more numbers, because the monsters in Wilds are amazing. And it feels like there's many more original first introduced monsters in Wilds than there were in World. So again, I'm not really sure we can count this as a negative, but there were just straight up more monsters in World. And when we're talking about quests, World had 27 main quests and 122 optional quests for a total of 149 hunts. Now, this doesn't include optional side quests that didn't include a hunt, like trying to make contact with all the Palicos or get new Palico weapons. Now, Wilds has 46 main quests and 73 optional quests, totaling in 119 hunts. So you can see the difference is 149 to 119. This is one of the main areas that I find Wilds lacking in. In World and Rise, we were giving many different optional hunts in various areas, mixing and matching monsters together, usually in the arena or other areas. These were pretty memorable for their difficulty and just their creativity. In Wilds, we're basically just hunting tempered investigations that we create, and that really doesn't take the place of structured content that was given to us by Capcom in previous games. Not only that, but at launch, we also had 10 special arena quests, which were these predetermined special loadouts. You could pick your weapon and hunt a specific monster, and then there would be a leaderboard amongst the whole community, and you can compare with your friends or how you stacked up against a global leaderboard. This added a lot of content to people who wanted to challenge themselves and just see how they could do with predetermined loadouts instead of just overpowering the monsters with sheer force. Speaking of the arena, in World, we could also capture monsters, and then that would create a special quest that we could then fight them again in the arena. We have an arena that's not great, and it'll just have randomized monsters that appear in there. It's not the same as capturing a monster, seeing it in town, and then saying, hey, bring that thing out, I'm going to fight it. Okay, so that's a lot of yapping about numbers, and I can already see the comments, and I agree with you. You can't just look at the number of quests and make assumptions about the game's content. But having fewer quests and monsters is compounded further by the lack of difficulty. Hunts are much shorter. Where a hunt in World would take 20 minutes or more, a Wilds hunt that takes more than 10 minutes feels rare. I'm not saying that I miss spending 40 minutes hunting a monster, but when you take that in addition to fewer quests, it does feel like you get through the game a lot quicker. I think this is the fastest I've ever gotten to Hunter Rank 100. Now, some of the difficulty reduction feels like a product of the new features and tools we've been given, like the focus strikes or breaking wounds, because you can break a wound and that will easily incapacitate a monster so then you can just freely hit on it.
Hey, baby.
But also it feels like the monsters are less deadly and they have lower hit points. So everything feels much faster paced with a lot less risk. Now, another part that makes the game feel faster and feel like there's less content is the lack of an actual hunt and track mechanic like World had. In Rise, I know they were on the minimap, but in World, you did not know where the monster was. You either had an idea of where they might be, like a Rathalos might be up in their nest, but you had to go find them. And you used the scout flies to track them. You would pick up stuff and it would fill up a meter. And it felt satisfying to fill up that meter because eventually you would get different levels. I know a lot about Rathalos, so I might hunt with my friend. They don't know anything about Rathalos, but I, being the smart hunter that I am, have already tracked Rathalos and I see them on the map. Wilds is lacking that feeling of earning your ability to hunt a monster. It's just on the map You just jump on your secret, you press auto run, and then you go get a cup of coffee. You come back and you're right at the monster. So it feels like the hunts are missing a lot of their exploration factor. I don't know these maps. I've hunted all of the monsters and I know none of the maps. If you had to tell me to get somewhere, I would not know how to get there without the secret auto pathing me over there. This may be controversial to newer players in the genre, but having every monster fully trackable on the map takes away one of the core elements of older Monster Hunter games. Now, I'm enjoying the faster pace of these hunts, but it's undeniable that this quality of life has reduced some of the gameplay and boiled it down to Monster Slayer instead of Monster Hunter. Now, I'm sure this is going to age like fine milk, but the game is too easy right now to even need to optimize our mixed sets and grind out Ardean weapons. I'm still hunting because the combat is the best it's ever been, but there's little need to grind until Capcom has added new and difficult monsters. Okay, let's lay off the content for a little bit and we'll talk about pacing. The story in Monster Hunter Wilds feels unlike any other Monster Hunter entry in the series, for better or worse. This game puts a strong focus on the story for the first half of the game, to the detriment of the core gameplay. For a new player to the series, this may feel totally normal to be put on rails until the story ends, but it was quite jarring for me. In every other game, you're left to explore the area until you trigger a cutscene and find the monster, but Wilds doesn't even let you stop to grab some honey.
Hey, stay with me. Hey, stay with me. Hey, stay with me.
I wanted to explore these beautiful zones when they were introduced, but instead we're left on a guided tour until we reach the next hub area, and the best thing to do after that is just to fast travel around. It took away a lot of the awe factor in reaching these new zones. Like, I can still remember in World when they took us to Coral Highlands, and the joy of exploring this unique and gorgeous area for the first time. In Wilds, we enter Scarlet Forest, and all I wanted to do was run around, but Nata told me not to wander, and I do whatever Nata says, apparently. Now, let me try to undo some of this trash I've talked about the story, because I loved the story. The characters were great, and I love that feeling of being that dude throughout the entire game. My only issue is the pacing and the removal of player agency. Now, to compare to World, we'd be given a story mission or three, and then that would unlock a large section of optional hunts for us to do. From there, you could take a break from the story, you could do some optional hunts with your friends, and then say, hey, I'm ready to go back into the story, I've geared up a little bit, and go do another story mission. We were able to take our time and complete the story at our own pace, taking breaks to gather or explore the areas, while Wild seems to want you to complete the story and nothing else. By the end of the story, I felt like I wanted to skip some of the cutscenes just because I wanted to get let off the leash. I wanted to be free to explore. And I knew that once I completed the story out, it would finally be open-ended. Whereas in other Monster Hunter games, it felt like a mix of both. So I don't know that telling a great story is worth taking away that core element of Monster Hunter that gives us that freedom. Finally, the endgame. For most of us, the real endgame is making those perfect mix sets and glamour designs. At launch in World and Wilds, the only true endgame grind is customizable weapons, decoration collecting, and hunting crowns, which, if you don't know, is looking for exceptionally large monsters and checking them off on your list by murdering them. For the most part, these are very similar in both games, but I do have an issue with the customizable weapons. So in Wilds, as you may know, we have the Ardean weapon system, which is comparable to the endgame weapons in Iceborne and World, but they feel like a steep downgrade here. In World, we were able to choose from a decent selection of Elder Dragon weapons and customize the stats on those by grinding out different items. This gave us some options and design choices, while in Wilds, the Ardean weapons are some of the ugliest weapon designs I've ever seen. No shame if you like them, but these futuristic weapons just aren't for me. I want a piece of a monster. I don't want to hit them with a robot. Even further, the only real reason that the Ardean weapons are even good is because of the change to the equipment design and the abilities. You see, before Capcom launched, they assured us that there wouldn't be any issue with having two different weapons equipped because all of your attack abilities were supposed to be tied to the weapons and all of your defensive abilities were tied to your armor, meaning that if you swapped weapons, you would also swap the abilities of the weapons. So when you change your weapon, you would change out important abilities that made that weapon optimal. This would let you swap between two weapons without messing up your sets or losing DPS. For me, this is the biggest failure. Instead of opening up new combat options and combinations, the current system makes the two weapon system nearly useless. If you're playing optimally, you'll just have two of the same type of weapon unless those weapons have very similar properties, like a greatsword and a hammer. What I mean is, if you bring a greatsword and a bowgun, one of those weapons will be missing core decos and abilities it needs to perform optimally because many of the armor sets that favor greatsword don't favor bowgun and vice versa. A good example of this is the burst ability on the G Ebony set. The set bonus extends the burst ability's duration, so you might want to have all four of those together on a fast attacking weapon. The problem is, burst ends after a few seconds of not hitting. Greatsword spends many seconds not attacking because it's a slow weapon and it's winding up or charging, so you lose the effect of burst. So if you're using a burst set, you really can't equip a greatsword as your secondary weapon because you're losing out on a lot of potential abilities that you could have in an optimized mix set for greatsword. Conversely, Counter-Strike is incredible for Greatsword, but mostly uses on other weapons because you can't shoulder charge through attacks. So putting Counter-Strike on a whole set and then swapping over to something that can't trigger it feels bad. To bring this even further, the current decoration limitations really hurt build diversity. See, guard abilities are for some reason locked to weapons, even though they're defensive skills. Putting them on a weapon feels like a straight downgrade to your damage, where you could be putting attack boost or critical boost in one of your 3 very limited slots. Whereas there are a lot of decorations that boost your attack that go directly on your armor, and your armor doesn't swap off when you swap weapons. And this, exhaustively, brings me back to the original point I made so long ago. Ardian weapons are only good because they have 3 large deco slots. Every other weapon has a default selection of predetermined abilities that you may, or in most cases, don't want to use. Like they put focus on every cool looking hammer, and hammer doesn't need focus at all. Having 3 large deco slots on an Ardian weapon is great, but only because most other weapons in the game feel very constrictive with this predetermined ability on them. Okay, rant over. I think I've made my point, and I would love if they remove some of the restrictions on deco slots in the future, because it's really limiting build options right now without providing the intended purpose of letting you swap between 2 different weapons. I really want to hear from you though. What do you think went right or wrong in Wilds? And what, if anything, do you want Capcom to change in future patches? Please like, subscribe, and call your mother because she misses you.